Good morning. My name is Mark Winiflor from the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits. Thanks for joining today's webinar on building strategic relationships with elected officials. This webinar is the last in our 2013 Nonprofit Advocacy webinar series. I'd like to mention a couple things. First, you should see a slide on your computer screen with the title of today's webinar. If you don't, or if you have any problems during the webinar, please dial Start Meetings toll-free support line directly for assistance. The number is 800-644-9070. Again, that number is 800-644-9070. That number is also listed in the instructional email that was sent to you yesterday. To ensure good sound quality and eliminate background noise, we have muted the phone lines. You can hear us, but we can't hear you. But we do want you to ask questions. The way to do that is by using the chat box on the right side of your screen. You can choose to have your question seen by just the presenter or by all participants by selecting which recipient gets the message. Please feel free to post your questions in the chat box at any point during the webinar. We'll also set aside some time at the end for questions. After today, we'll send a follow-up email with a link to watch the webinar recording on our YouTube channel. Now let me turn things over to MCN's Public Policy Director, Susie Brown.
Good morning, and thanks everyone for joining us on this cold December morning. I think you all are throughout the state. Here in St. Paul it was 8 below this morning, so I hope everyone is staying warm and safe. And one of the great things about these webinars where you can hear us but we can't hear you is if you have that December cough and cold, you can hack away and we don't hear it. We apologize in advance for our coughing and sneezing that might happen during this webinar. But we're delighted that you're with us today. As a reminder about our work here at the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits in our public policy program, we support individual nonprofits and Minnesota's nonprofit sector to be their own voice in the public policy process. And we provide training on advocacy and lobbying. We serve as a resource to policymakers on the nonprofit sector, and we advocate on issues that impact all nonprofits, such as incentives to charitable giving, nonprofit tax exemptions, lobbying rights, and election activity rights. I'll mention as a side note that just this morning, probably while we're on this call, many people, I assume most of you, will get an email from us that tells you about our 2014 public policy agenda and invites you to join us in that work. So we hope you click on that email and consider being a part of this advocacy work for 2014. As Mark mentioned, this is the final in our 2013 series of webinars. After this webinar, we hope to get some feedback from you about this webinar series as we work to develop our 2014 training plan. We appreciate your input in advance. Today's presenters, in addition to myself, I'm delighted to be joined today by Nora Slawick. Nora is a person who wears many hats. She is most recently has been elected to be the incoming mayor of the city of Maplewood. Is that January 1st-ish?
January 6th.
January 6th. Yeah. So if any of you live in Maplewood, please welcome your new mayor to this call. Nora is also a former member of the Minnesota House of Representatives, representing Maplewood and surrounding areas, and she's one of us. She's the education director at the Autism Society of Minnesota, so a great person who wears many hats who can help us think about being strategic in building relationships with elected officials. One thing that I'll just mention in the beginning that isn't on the slides today is sometimes as we build relationships with elected officials, we need to really think about how we address people. And in this particular case with our guest today, we could address her as Representative Slawick, as Nora, or as Mayor-elect Slawick. So we use those terms differently for different purposes. Today I think we'll call you Nora.
I think that's fine.
Okay.
You know, people do ask me that, and Nora's my preferred.
Okay. So, but it is important to know what people prefer as we proceed with these relationships. I'd like to just highlight today's learning objectives. There are several. We'd like to consider the purpose and outcomes of building strategic relationships with elected officials. We hope that you learn about the unique challenges and opportunities of nonprofit relationship building with elected officials, which has a few differences from other relationship building. We'd like you to understand the needs, demands, and constraints of elected officials, and Nora can help us unpack some of that. We'd like you to learn ideas and specific tactics to develop strategic relationships with elected officials, consider the nuances of long-term organizational relationship management with elected officials, and understand some of the common pitfalls and other considerations. As Mark mentioned, we will have time at the end for questions, but we certainly do encourage you to type your questions into the chat box as we're talking. We'd be happy to address them as we go. So briefly, the purpose and outcomes of building strategic relationships with elected officials, and we'll dig into these a little bit more after this slide. A couple of key purposes. One is to be a resource. A second is connecting people with specific leverage in policy making. Another is to tell the story of your organization and the concerns of your constituency. And the outcomes that you can expect from these relationships would be increased awareness of your organization's role and mission, increased awareness of the needs of your organization's constituency, opportunities to advance the policy objectives of your mission. In the following slides, we will take a deeper dive into the purpose and outcomes and the other learning objectives for today. The roles in this conversation today will be that I will move us through the content that you see on your slides, and Nora is here to offer real-life examples and stories about some of these situations. If there are points that we cover that don't have a story attached and you're interested in an example, please type that into your chat box and ask us for that. So the purpose of building strategic relationships with elected officials. First of all, it's important that we consider that our organizations truly are a resource to the folks who are in elected office. Elected officials need information and they need stories. And each elected official needs those things variably. Some need more information, some need more stories. That's for you to sort out as you get to know folks. But I think we all know that our organizations have both, and they tend to have both information and stories in a way that gives really deep and important information from our communities, both anecdotes and data. Additionally, telling the story of your organization and sharing the concerns of your constituency, this is an opportunity really to build goodwill among community leaders and build the foundation for advancing policies that align with your mission. The people who represent your organization or your constituency in elected office are really interested in knowing what's happening in their community. They're interested in understanding the institutions that provide service in the community and the concerns of the people who come through your doors for service. This is really an opportunity beyond whether you want a particular policy to pass or you have a particular advocacy goal, just to build some goodwill and understanding as a community institution. And additionally, purpose is connecting with the people who actually have leverage in policymaking. We think of ourselves as important players in policymaking and advocacy, but actually there's specific leverage that we don't have, which is the power to write bills and to pass bills and to build support among leadership. Figuring out who the people are who have the leverage to actually be able to make the changes that you seek is essential. Being strategic about that is the way that you can achieve that purpose best. Next, we'll shift to what are the outcomes, and I'll run through these points, and then we'll hear some examples. One of the outcomes of building strategic relationships with elected officials is just increasing the awareness of your organization's role and mission. Many of our organizations are quiet leaders in the community, and we actually don't want to be the best kept secret in town. Elected officials have lots of opportunities to tell your story and to be advocates on behalf of the people that you serve. So building a relationship as a basic awareness-raising opportunity is very important. Additionally, you are aware of the concerns of the people that you serve, but the people who represent you as elected officials may not be aware of all the concerns of your constituency. So your organization and its leaders have a unique opportunity and, frankly, an obligation to make the concerns of your community known to those who have the role and the power to make change. And finally, this is an opportunity to advance the policy objectives of your mission. If, as you think with your board or your key management staff or your strategic planning committee, that you can imagine a world that would work better for those who your mission is designed to serve, and you can think of ways that policies will be better designed to serve your constituency, there's an opportunity and an obligation to move that forward with elected officials. Nora, do you have some examples on the outcomes?
Yes. First of all, I want to thank Susie for inviting me here today. She's always been a leader in nonprofit organizations, so appreciate you having me come over. When I look at the slide based on outcomes, one of the biggest things you want to remember is you don't want to get to know your elected official when there's a crisis. So it's really important to do that relationship building long before you need that bill passed or long before you need that policy change. The example I'll give in this area is my current work as the Director of Education at the Autism Society of Minnesota. So one of our programs that we do takes place at the Como Zoo and Conservatory. And if you know the governance of Como Zoo, it actually is run by the City of St. Paul, which is governed by the City Council. And so for us, we felt it was important to get to know those city council folks. We invited them to come over and see our program. What we looked at when you're inviting elected officials is who has jurisdiction over that area. Now, for Como Zoo and Conservatory, it's kind of interesting because they have two council people that have parts of Como, so you have to invite both of them to make sure you're doing things right. So you want to kind of check out if there's any issues like that. So we invited Russ Stark and Amy Brendamoen, and then with your city councils, you can only have 3 elected officials at a time. If you have more than that, it's considered a violation of the open meeting law. So we decided we would add one more person, and we chose Kathy Lantry, who is the president of St. Paul City Council. We arranged for them to come over on a Saturday. A little bit tough because, Russ plays basketball, and they have their own, commitments, and they do a really good job, most elected officials, of blocking out time on their calendar that you will not have access to, whether it's family time, workout time, or whatever they're doing. So we were able to find a time in the afternoon when they came over, and we brought them into our high school group, our teen program. I have to say, at the beginning, the elected officials were actually a little bit nervous. I think when people think of kids with autism, they really don't know what they're going to see. Our kids are very high-functioning. It's a co-taught program, so we had our social skills teachers start out and do the social skills part, which included the city council members introducing themselves. I think that really put them at ease. I did a social skill lesson on friendship, and then we moved into the zoo part. And so also for that city council to see them their own zoo folks performing, which, by the way, they're excellent, worked just very well. And so it went from sort of what is this all about to, this is a really cool program, and we are really glad we came. So that's what's important. I'm an old United Way person. That was my first nonprofit experience, and we used to have folks tour the homeless shelters and different programs, but there's nothing like getting people out to a tour. So I also wanted to encourage you to do that, and hope that, again, you can do it before you have that crisis. So in our case, just to say, we signed an MOU with the City of St. Paul, which is a memorandum of understanding. So one of our students trips and falls, or different things that could happen there. We want to know our city council people before we're in a relationship where perhaps something has happened. We hope that day won't come, but that's why that was important. So there's my first example.
That's great. And a couple of takeaways from that, one of which you just repeated, Nora, is building these relationships before there's a crisis or a specific need or ask is really important. And then additionally, I think it's great how you highlighted that you were able to think in advance about what kinds of concerns the elected officials you had invited might have about this meeting. And there might be a number of different situations our nonprofits have, either our locations or something unique about the people that we serve, that might make the incoming elected official feels some discomfort, and anticipating that and thinking in advance about how to put them at ease so it can be a productive meeting is a great strategy.
So I also want to say, so after we had the tour, we went into a separate meeting room, and then we did a debrief. So they could ask questions, they could, ask where we're going and what we think about the partnership with the zoo and all those types of things. So make sure you not only schedule that time to show them your program, but some time for them to process it.
Okay, so next I'd like to just go through a few unique challenges and opportunities of nonprofit relationships with elected officials. And when I talk about nonprofits here, I'm talking about what I assume is the organizational reality of most of you on the webinar, which is that we are 501c3 organizations, which doesn't have to be any kind of big barrier to this, but there are some things to be aware of. Namely, the first point, which is that we are by our nature and by law nonpartisan, and we may not engage in election-related activities. And I wanted to highlight this because it's the reality in other sectors, and certainly in other with other folks who do advocacy, that there's actually an awful lot of relationship building that happens around elections, and maybe people who are helping on campaigns and such. And I wanted to just call to everyone's attention that in our specific organizational roles, that is not an appropriate activity, and we need to operate and build and maintain our relationships outside of specific election-related activities. That would be a unique challenge, but mostly we have opportunities, one of which is that we are community institutions that have standing, credibility, visibility, and a clear and compelling role. Often our organizations are sought by elected officials and seen as a valuable relationship that goes both ways, because we tend to be community leaders and they would like to get to know us as much as we'd like to get to know them. Additionally, as I mentioned before, often our organizations have information that's useful to elected officials, and depending on the person, that may be data, that may be anecdotes, that may be personal stories, but we have something that they need, which is different perhaps than other people, a small business entity or whatever, all kinds of other folks that are building relationships with elected officials. We have unique community information. And finally, we're connected to people. We don't bring necessarily lots of money into policy and advocacy and elections, but we do bring people, and people are voters, and elected officials want to have relationships with voters. So the extent to which we can, as Nora was suggesting, I don't know if the young people that you brought to the Como Zoo were 18 or not, but maybe their parents are. Surely their parents are. And they all will be someday, and elected officials like to build relationships with voters, and that's something that we have. Okay, I'll talk a little bit about needs, demands, and constraints of elected officials. I am not an elected official, so I'm going to run through these fairly quickly, and this is, again, an opportunity where we can hear from our resident elected official about her experience and points of view. First of all, elected officials are expected to have general knowledge on a wide range of issues. It is true that many elected officials have expertise in some areas and may have interest that is growing or that they are encouraged to build in specific areas. But even if they express lots of interest in an area, like Nora was really an expert and a champion on early childhood education, they are expected to have general knowledge on a wide range of issues, and you can help them with that. But also understanding that that is the context within which they work is helpful. Also, as I just mentioned, each elected official has some areas of personal interest or issue areas in which they are willing to take leadership, and trying to determine that and build relationships with people who are interested in or have special knowledge about the area of your concern is an important strategy. Elected officials also put their primary relationship building efforts into their own constituency. So many of us may have some disconnect perhaps between the person who is the lead on your particular issue area and where your organization is located or where your constituency lives. But you can still, even if the person who represents you isn't, for example, the lead on affordable housing, if that's your issue, still building a relationship with them, because they will be very interested in knowing their own constituency, is really important, and working through them to get to the leaders on the issue that you care about is a good strategy. Elected officials need research, data, and stories, and individuals respond differently and make use of this information differently. And this I've repeated already a couple of times, but as you're building relationships in order to be strategic, think about with them and talk to them and listen to them about what is it that actually moves them and what's going to help them do their work. Some people might need hard research and data that comes from think tanks. Others might need personal stories. So think about ways that you can respond to their particular needs. Elected officials also have enormous demands on their time and their intellectual capacity. They really are incredible public servants, and understanding and being sympathetic to the fact that they have enormous demands on time and capacity is a helpful way to approach your relationships. And also, finally, elected officials are often very interested in understanding and being connected to the people and the institutions in their community. And you are that. And you can offer that to them.
All right. Well, with that I'm on. Susie gets a sip of her tea. And I think this is a really important slide, and I think that Susie covered a lot of the points well, but I think it's very important to pay attention to a couple of these points. One is for elected officials that have some area of personal interest or area where they're willing to take leadership. So in my case, it was early childhood education, and my other interest was autism. But the most important thing actually was location and where my constituents lived. So all of my appointments, if it was a constituent coming in as a legislator, then that was the most important. We have, many days on the Hill, whether it's, housing day, union day, child care day, I still would prioritize my constituents come first. And there's a reason for that. Of course, in the House of Representatives, we were up for re-election every 2 years, and so we were always very close to our constituents. When you look at who you're going to line up if you're going to visit a legislature, and if it is something like a housing issue, and you think, well, we're going to cover every legislator and we're going to get somebody to see everyone. Not a good strategy. If you are going to cover everyone by where they live and that they're a constituent of that legislator, that is a good strategy. And I always remember one of the issues I'm passionate about is autism, and this lobbyist who I'd known for a long time brought in a constituent from a completely different area, and not only did that, but had the person sort of, forgive me, but cry on cue about their struggles. And so one, it didn't seem very genuine to me, and two, they weren't my constituents. So when that happens, you will probably be kind of hustled out of the office pretty quick. And if you're wondering to yourself, what did I do wrong? Well, that is considered is wrong. You really want to have that constituent there. There is also sort of this issue of where you personally live versus where your nonprofit is. You can tie into them as a personal constituent and then talk about your nonprofit. That's one way to do it. Or you can go to the location where your nonprofit is. You can do either way. In terms of the needs for research, when we're looking for testimony, and often with legislators, it would be very last minute. So it would be within a day or two of the testimony. We may call up your nonprofit and ask you to testify on a variety of different issues. So, for example, whether it's the YMCA and sort of the issue about taxing, YMCAs, we would ask our local. So in that case, I would ask my local YMCA in my community, the closest one is Woodbury, to come and testify about that. So we would expect you to be receptive for that, knowing it's not easy to testify at the legislature because legislators' job is to actually dig into issues, so it can get kind of sticky. As far as the demands on time and intellectual capacity, I found that sort of interesting wording. There are a lot of demands, especially on a legislator's time, and they're trying to juggle their committee assignments, their constituent assignments, their caucus work, all into one day. But again, they will rank by constituent. So if you really want to get into see a legislator, make sure that their assistant knows your constituent. And as far as intellectual capacity, I think part of it is based on those interests. So I've been approached on everything from mining issues, which generally are seen as something that happens in northern Minnesota, but there's a company in Oakdale, which I represented, that works on that. So you have to remember it may not be that it's not that they don't like your issue or they don't have time for it. They may be just full in terms of their intellectual capacity, but they should always see you. So there's some points on that.
Great, and I put the intellectual capacity thing on there, not as any sort of disrespect to the intellect of legislators, but frankly to the bandwidth question that we all only have so much knowledge that we can hold at one time. And so if a legislator isn't able to take a deep dive with you on your issue, it may be that they have done so on other issues, and maybe they can help refer you to a person who's super knowledgeable about your issue. But these are regular folks, regular human beings, and having some empathy for that is helpful. Okay. Next, ideas and tactics. Again, I'll run through this, and then Nora will have some examples. Some of this we have covered. Start with those who represent the community in which your organization is located. Identify others who are interested in the work of your organization, the policies related to your mission, or the conditions of your constituency. So bringing in other people who can complement your approach or your relationships. Actually, the example that you suggested about the person who brought in a young person with autism who didn't live in your district.
Well, as a mom, but a mom.
Okay.
Yeah. So
one way that we can think about connecting with others who are interested in our work is to cross-pollinate between organizations. You're not the only organization that cares about this issue. If you really want to go talk to Representative Slawick, is there another organization that might know somebody who has a person in their district? We do this work in coalition, and building these relationships in coalition in order to strengthen and make them more strategic is a great idea. Listen, please listen when you're meeting with legislators. You have a lot to say, and you can expect that they will listen, but you should also certainly listen to them and hear what do they want or need from you. Think about how is what they want or need from you similar or different from others. You might hear somebody such as Nora say, what I want is some data, and then what I'm going to need is 24 hours before the hearing, I'm going to call you and I'm going to need you to show up. Can you do that? And if you actually don't hear that when she says it, you could be blindsided and have trouble with the relationship later. Bring constituents, we know that. Build relationships with their staff. The staff people at the legislature are just wonderful people. It is part of their job, not their only job, but part of their job to kind of serve as an intermediary between the public and constituents and the representative, if for no other reason than scheduling, but also sometimes in a really substantive way. They can be really good allies. You may interface with them frequently, and thinking about them as a strategic relationship is also a good idea. Related to that, help them, both the elected and the staff, do their job, thinking about what their interest is in this relationship, as in addition to what your interest is, will be good for everyone. Always be cordial, professional, and helpful. Be open-minded, and never burn bridges. For those of you that are looking at the PowerPoint that was sent earlier, I made a funny typo that said never build bridges. Of course, it means never burn bridges. And always be patient and persistent.
Okay, good. I think a lot of these points are, again, really very important. You know, the first one of start with those who represent the community in which your organization is located. Typically what I would do is if I was in front of an audience, I would ask you to raise your hand if you've visited with your legislator in the past year, or your city council person or your county commissioner. And usually not very many hands go up. So for that audience out there, is there anybody raising their hand? I hope you have visited with your legislators. It's something that you should write on your calendar once a year. You can either do it during the session, or we can talk about, in the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about developing a year-round relationship. But the more you go, the more your elected official is going to think of you when they need that information at the last minute, when they need somebody to testify. And just by seeing people once a year, it was definitely those people I would then call. I felt they had an interest in what I was doing and an interest in moving it forward. When you identify who's interested in the work of your organization and the policies related to your mission or conditions of your constituency, that's really the coalition building. So in a lot of cases, I always remember Representative Alice Hausman would talk about the coalition building is it's important to you all as nonprofits. It's actually really important to us as legislators. We liked when a constituent would come visit or a person from a nonprofit if they were part of a coalition, and how they were connected and how they were coalition building, because we know actually very few things get passed at the legislature without that coalition. So the more you can visit about that and then ask, for example, in early childhood, if you would ask me, how can we move this forward? Well, of course, they did wonderful work, and they passed all kinds of things once they left. In the last year, they did more work, but we laid a lot of that groundwork. But it's not always just a straight answer. So when you think of early ed, you might think of child care, but there's everything to sort of creative funding. So like in Seattle, they try to tax on lattes. There's fees you can tack onto birth certificates. There's different ways of funding things that you want to talk to your legislator about, and if they're willing to try some of those things and who they're willing to work with on that. I think that building the relationship with the staff is probably the most important thing, because often, particularly for legislators, they are so busy and their days are so scheduled that you will not be able to see them, and it is only the staff that will clear that path. So if you've been down there, it's important. You can pull people out of a committee. So if they tell you, Representative Ward is booked up all day, you can say, I'm a constituent, and could you pull her out of committee? There's two Representative Wards. My replacement is the Representative Ward, Joanne Ward, and then there's John Ward from Brainerd. And at the mayor level, it's interesting because we don't really have staff. It's just the city staff. But you would go through the city staff to ask for that access. And that the points about being patient and not burning bridges is really important. I remember coming out of a floor debate, and it was a early childhood person we both know, Susie, who said, I can't believe you didn't get that amendment passed. I can't, why couldn't you do that? What happened? Why, what was the problem there? And it's like, it is really hard. And when you're on that House floor with your peers trying to pass something, it doesn't always go the way you want it to go. But the biggest thing you don't want to do is to chew your legislator out right after that happens, because they know. They know it didn't go well, and they want to help you, so you have to think about being very patient, again, and persistent and saying, how could we help you make that go better next time? Yeah.
Okay. I'll run through some on the next slide, nuances of long-term organizational relationship management with elected officials, and we'll get some examples here. We really encourage you to establish a year-round relationship while avoiding an election-oriented relationship. The point here really is these relationships matter throughout the year, not just during the legislative session. And actually, it might be far easier to get connected to them when it's outside of the legislative session, especially if it's in the same district. You can have them to your office. You can meet them for coffee at the local joint. You can do things that are outside of the frenzy and the busyness and the tension of the legislative session. We really encourage you to do that, and it actually speaks to the point that Nora made about, build these relationships before you actually need them. And please consider very carefully how you will do so while avoiding an election-oriented relationship. And I'll just add a little side note there, that it is not the job of the elected official or the person who's running for office to understand the constraints of being a 501c3 nonprofit. That's your job alone. And if an elected official asks for your assistance in their election, they may do so without any knowledge of the legal constraints that define our relationships with elections, and it's not their job to know that. It's our job, and actually it's my job at the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits to help you understand that, so please don't ever hesitate to be in touch with me.
Yeah, to that point, Susie, so some senators or representatives will be very forward about, can you work on my campaign, can you come to a fundraiser, those types of things, and again, you need to state what the boundaries are. One thing in running for mayor that was interesting, so when you run for a state office in the legislature, typically the staff might volunteer because it's caucus-driven, right? There's the DFL caucus and the Republican caucus. Well, at the city levels, they absolutely do not work on campaigns, and I didn't really understand or know that, and they also, so they stay very far from it, and it's fine. In our case, our city, briefly, the city of Maplewood was known as the most dysfunctional suburb in the Twin Cities. So, and the mayor who earned that title was my opponent. So she came in and fired the city manager, who then, in turn, the new city manager fired several of the staff. And so the staff had a very vested interest in having a mayor that isn't going to do that, which is me, yet. They could not work on my campaigns at all, and so I get it. But it was interesting, and it was really wonderful come election day to now we have that partnership where we can work together on policy.
Yep, great. Okay, a few more points here. Determine the relationship that elected officials would like to have with the people you serve. You know, you have a job of developing a relationship between your institution and a policymaker, but you can offer them something in the opportunity to get to know the people you serve. And there are many elected officials who would like to connect with the people you serve, learn more about them, build relationships. So consider what they are interested in. I would really recommend that as you do this work, you ensure that the relationship is with your organization. It will always be through a person, because a person picks up the phone and makes the call, or goes to the meeting, or maybe it's a couple of people. And one of the things that can be, you know, sort of an organizational risk is if these relationships are just with the people, and then when the person leaves the job or leaves your position as a board chair or whatever, that the relationship disappears. So thinking about constantly anchoring that relationship to the organization will be best for your long-term strategy. Help elected officials understand that the benefits that their actions have on your organization and the constituency you serve, which really is a prompt to say thank you to them. You are likely going to ask something of them. It might be something, as Nora mentioned in the last example, that is really hard, and taking the opportunity to share with them how that mattered to your organization or your constituency is really great for your long-term relationship.
So I'll just jump in more
on it
for this one. So one thing is if I think for year-round relationship building, to invite them to some of your events. The group homes had a big lobby effort, the developmental disabilities, so they would invite me to the group homes, but they would make it around an activity they were having. So could you come for dinner? We're going to be cooking dinner. Or they had this, the Arboretum come in and do gardening and it was really fascinating and actually really good for me to see that. And then whether it's the YMCA or wherever that you're invited, or a housing project, I mean, we like to go out and see those. We particularly like to go, legislators like to go to groundbreakings and sort of higher visibility things. And the one thing you always have to do is introduce them and Susie's ideas, thank them. And it's part of it's an ego thing, part of it is they are elected and they want to get reelected. So if you invite them to an event and they're way in the back and you see them, don't just wave. Say, I see, Representative Smith back there, and thanks to him for coming today and for what he did at the legislature this session. They will come back to your events just for that. That recognition is super important.
Great. And really, it is very important to remember that they want to keep their jobs because they want to keep doing the work for the community and for your organization and your constituency, and how to both help them without helping them in an actual election-oriented way, but help them be visible to the people that you serve is a great strategy. Okay, maintain relationships even when it might not seem that you need to. Well, we're all busy, and we all have a lot of relationships that we can see there's an immediate need to maintain. But maintaining relationships with the people who represent your organization or the people you serve, while you don't see an immediate need, is going to pay dividends in the long run, as with the example of the city council in the Como Zoo that Nora offered. And keep the focus in these relationships on the benefit to the organization's long-term mission and the well-being of the constituency you serve. We can get wrapped up in all kinds of events and testimony and days at the Capitol and all kinds of advocacy ideas. In the end of the day, this is really about how do you put together a menu of things which help your organization continue its long-term mission and serve the well-being of its constituencies. And building relationships with elected officials is one of the ways to do that over the long term. Okay, a few pitfalls or things to consider. One of the things I really believe strongly in is don't be shy because you're both doing your job. Sometimes we think, well, that person is too busy. Actually, they are really busy, and so are you. Or, do they really want to meet with me or whatever. The fact is they have a job to do and you have a job to do, and there are ways that you can each help each other do your job. So don't be shy, do your job, and expect that they will do their job as well.
Can I just comment on that? To that point, so my successor, the legislators are trying to figure out how to best do their job and how to who to meet with and who not to meet with. So she'll ask me for recommendations on that. And so an example was she was invited to an event in Eden Prairie, which is a long way from Woodbury, but it's around autism, the Minnesota Autism Center. But she had visited, which is called MAC, a MAC program in Woodbury. So should she go all the way to Eden Prairie, or should she just focus on the one in her town? And what we always rank things on are, one, the constituency, right? So is it your community? So if you've done that. Two is, does it relate to your committee work? So remember also that if they're on Health and Human Services in particular, it is such a big and overwhelming committee, as they do want to get to know the different areas usually, and so you can remind them that you do related committee work. Three, then if it's, again, if there's going to be movers and shakers there, they might want to come because they might want to mingle with a certain people, so you can remind them who's coming to that tour or who they're going to meet at that time or at that event. But yeah, they want to help. There's mutual, what we call self-interest.
Great. Never burn bridges. We've been over this. That doesn't need any explanation. Find a balance between high and realistic expectations. I think your example, Nora, of what happened on the floor, where you were working really hard to try to pass something that was desired by both you and the advocacy community in early childhood, and it didn't work out that way, well, that's realistic that happens. And finding a balance as you work through these relationships between holding high expectations, it's very important to do so, and understanding that realistic expectations are probably going to rule the day. And then I think from your story, the example is, and kindness shall prevail at the end of all these experiences. Never support or oppose a candidate for political office. If you have questions about why or how or what that should look like, please do contact me directly at the Council of Nonprofits. Avoid building relationships solely with members of a single political party. You may feel like one of the parties is far more aligned with your philosophy or the concerns of your constituency than another political party, but it is not a good long-term strategy to build one-sided relationships, because every committee and the whole legislature is made up of two parties, at least, maybe more someday, and the governor holds a lot of power, and that goes back and forth, as we all well know, and actually people in both political parties do care about their constituents and about the kind of work that you do in the community. They may have different points of view on how to get from A to B, but please don't handicap yourself by building relationships with just one party. Always listen, we talked about that before, and tailor your approach to the needs of the elected official, and also assume that they are listening carefully. Always follow through. It's critical to maintaining your credibility. Sometimes we get asked things in meetings with legislators or when we're testifying. We get asked things that we can't imagine on the spot how we will fulfill. Can you get me X or whatever? And if you say you will do so, you need to follow through. Or if you say, I will get you whatever data they were looking for, and you learn later that you're not able to do so, following through to share with them why you're not able to give them what they requested is really critical. I think they remember when people don't follow through and who does follow through.
So that it is a really important point. If you may be waiting for the information, you may be waiting for a floor debate that's a month away, but if you don't hear back, it will hurt the relationship.
Never make up answers or give misleading or false information. You know, that's sort of one of those everything I needed to know I learned in kindergarten type points. But I wanted to highlight that here because sometimes we feel really on the spot when we're in conversations with legislators, particularly if we are in the testimony chair, and we feel like we want to be able to provide an answer, and that I don't know or I need to get back to you might be insufficient, but I don't know or I need to get back to you is much, much, much better than making something up or giving information that's misleading or false. That will come back to you, and it won't work out well. So even though it might feel tense or uncomfortable to have to say, I don't know, it is far better in the long run than saying something else that you're not sure about. If you say you will get back to them with information, do so. I've already covered that. And avoid gossip, innuendo, and shenanigans. I just wanted to put that in there because sometimes when you're at the legislature, and certainly in some city council experiences and other areas of this kind of work, sometimes it can feel a little bit like junior high. And that's just a fact. But we don't need to participate in it, and the extent to which we can avoid these kinds of things will certainly help our relationships in the long term, and I'm sure you can all imagine why. I think that.
Well, I would say let the legislators may be doing the innuendos and the gossip and the shenanigans, and so let them do it as when you're testifying and they're talking back and forth. The one that came to mind to me was when we first passed that quality rating system money, and one of the purposes of the money is you could use it to buy better toys and sort of educational for the kids. And so we had someone testify that they, instead of serving X number of people, they bought X number of items, which was totally allowable, but the legislators really flipped out over that. And so you might want to run your testimony by staff, or just mention some things that you are going to mention if you think it might be controversial, because I remember that being a pretty difficult moment, and then we had to call them back to testify again.
That's a great example, another mention of staff, that often it's really helpful to connect with staff to just check in on your strategy and how you are thinking about approaching an issue or approaching a legislator. And they're often really helpful and have a point of view and are willing to be a useful resource, and especially if you've built a cordial relationship with them in advance. The next slide is a few thoughts about boundaries. Again, I'll run through this, and Nora has some things to offer. You might friend or follow elected officials, and by that I mean in social media, and that could be fine. Or that could be a slippery slope. Just to remember that, what you say in social media, if you're a friend or a follower of an elected official, is something that they can see. You certainly never want to say anything untoward in your relationships with elected officials, or anybody else for that matter. There's a question here also about, are these people your friends, neighbors, and relatives outside of your professional life? In many cases, particularly in small communities, but really anywhere in Minnesota, this might be the case. The elected official might be a former board member of your organization, might be somebody that you run into at the supermarket. We really need to think about how to both maximize the existing nature of the relationship and compartmentalize the professional relationship, because in the end of the day, this is about building a strategic professional relationship with your institution. The extent to which you have personal crossover in those relationships that can help that happen is great, but always think about how to keep the lines clear. Treat elected officials as professionals within the boundaries of your nonprofit organization's role, and expect the same from them. That's very similar to the conversation about the previous point. I'd like to call your attention to the fact that the Minnesota Campaign Finance and Public Disclosure Board has information about the Minnesota laws which prohibit gift giving to elected officials. This needs to be taken very seriously. Your organization and individuals within your organization can get in trouble. And it's not, the Campaign Finance Board is not a policing entity. They are meant to be helpful, and they're meant to help people understand what the appropriate boundaries are between institutions and individuals and the people that they are trying to influence. And the purpose of laws around gift giving and such have to do with undue influence. And there are some situations for nonprofit organizations where we might give things to elected officials and not think twice about it, like giving a award that comes with something of value, a gift card or whatever. And we may give that to a community leader and an elected official. And in some circumstances, we have to take pause before giving it to an elected official and think about what the laws are. And then finally, while your organization may not support people in their elections as institutions, you may certainly do so in your personal life. The fact that you work for a 501c3 nonprofit does not prohibit you from being an active and engaged citizen in the democratic process in your community. And you should be very careful to use discretion, follow the law, and never forget the perception rules the day. So if you are a high-profile person in the community, the head of a large nonprofit in your small community, and you also take on the role of campaign manager and primary spokesperson for somebody who's running for office, even though the letter of the law might say that has a clear, bright line between it, perception rules, and there could be certainly a perception that your organization is taking part in an election in a way that they're not supposed to. So just think carefully about this. Don't limit your own activity around your personal interest in elections because you work for a nonprofit, but please do so in a way that's smart and strategic and taking consideration. Just some thoughts about?
Yeah, I mean, a wide variety of topics on this. I mean, one is the sort of Facebook thing, so a lot of elected officials will have their official page. So, for instance, I have my Nora Slavic for Mayor page, and then I have my personal page, and so I will post, more mayor things on that one and more personal things on the other, but it does get, the lines can get pretty blurred when you have like 1,000 friends, you know what I mean? And so I think just always do keep it professional even on Facebook, and be careful with that. I think that's a slippery slope, but especially with the really hard one's probably Twitter, is please don't Twitter about elected officials, and again, whether you liked or didn't like their votes. I just don't think it's is going to do you a lot of good or your organization. So Twitter's the one where people kind of get in trouble the most on. As far as they might be your real friends, neighbors, or relatives, and I thought that one's always been interesting because I lost my second term, and then, of course, I retired in January from the legislature, and you kind of learn who your real friends are, who your political friends are, and there are definitely a lot of people that drop off, and so just keep it cordial because they want, they're trying to figure some of those things out too, and you mostly it is you're going to have that relationship as an organization, but if they're your next door neighbor or your friend, that's a much, much smaller group that works as that. Let's see, okay. I think the rest of them you kind of know. The Campaign Finance Board, it's $5, right, for legislators still? $5. Yeah, so $5 is not much. You can basically buy your legislator.
And that's the limit for what you can give, the value of what you can give to an elected official.
And it's so a cup of coffee is what we see it as. And then, so every once in a while someone will get some bookmarks or something made, but it's best not to give gifts to your legislators or our city or county officials, and just not to get mixed up in that. There's, some people have drawn the line on can it be a wedding present if they are good friends. I mean, there's some of those things that you could ask for further advice about. So that's I think that this is all good advice, and again, you can support people, but if you're outdoor knocking or anything, you would never want to say the name of your nonprofit organization. You just really do want to keep that clean, and you want to keep your job, right?
You want to keep your job, keep your organization out of trouble so it can keep doing good work. I'll just give a quick example, and please, if you have questions at this point, we have a few minutes before the end, please type them in now. I'll give an example of the gift giving that one of the things to do is just be really on alert about that, because sometimes we we're inadvertently generous and we don't even think about it as gift giving. My example about that is being in a situation with a state legislator where we were both at a meeting and then everybody needed to go buy their own lunch, and this person forgot his wallet, and I said, I'll get your lunch today, and he said, absolutely, you will not get my lunch today. This is one where, unlike I said before that the elected official isn't responsible for understanding our 501c3 laws, actually in this case, when it comes to campaign finance and public disclosure, the legislators are likely as aware, if not more aware, than we are about the limits. I was very grateful to him that in my moment of generosity, I would have said to anybody who forgot their wallet, I'll get your lunch today, that he said, no, you can't do that. That would be a prohibited gift. So what
happened? Did he just have coffee?
He went back and got his wallet at his office, and it was all taken care of.
I was going to say one thing to your points, and this is a little bit about points that have already been made, but another way to build a relationship is legislators really like getting awards. You talk about awards. So if your organization has a community builder or a policymaker of the year, all those types of things, legislators love to come to those meetings and get those awards, and so that can be a really good relationship building.
That's great. We have a question from Heather. Heather says she's wondering about talking with your legislator about issues I might have.
Let me one second.
Talking with your legislator about issues I might have personal experience with and would like to take action, or at least notify the legislator about, as an individual and not as a part of a nonprofit. Are they less likely to take me seriously? How do I meet? Would you like to address that, Nora? It sounds like a classic constituent meeting.
So, meaning she has her nonprofit hat on, but she wants to talk about...
She wants to go in as an individual to talk about her own personal issues and experiences, like a constituent would.
Right. I think legislators want to hear your own personal experiences. I think you'd clearly need to say, though, hey, I'm here as a constituent, as a resident of your district, and not as part of my work. I think if you just say that, and even in an email, if you follow up with that, so if they want to hear about your personal issues, and I'm trying to think about early childhood education or different budget issues or homelessness, I think they want to hear your passion, and particularly that you're a constituent. But yeah, you could sort of qualify or disqualify.
And being affiliated with a nonprofit organization might bring you a certain level of clout, or they might already be aware of your presence in the community when you meet a legislator under that, with your organizational affiliation. But absolutely, legislators are about meeting with individual voters in their own district, so never hesitate to do that. Any other questions coming in at the moment? Please let us know. Meanwhile, I'll move to the last couple of slides. I'd like to just offer these relationship-building resources. The Minnesota House and Senate websites have detailed information on every legislator. So, for example, Nora was talking about know what committees they serve on. You'll find that if you look up your legislator on the House or Senate website. And you'll find some other things like how many terms have they served, a variety of other information that you might find interesting or useful. Local government websites will have the information on people such as the mayor-elect, and I put her information in there as well as St. Paul, and you can just Google your own local government. Politics in Minnesota has a product called the Directory, which is a very detailed explanation or sort of a
analysis
biography of both the legislative district history as well as the legislators themselves. And they interview each of you? Is that how they get that information?
By the time I was in my seventh term, though, they would just sort of confirm and say, what can we cross out, what can we change?
But so they might know something that is useful, like they might be able to say, well, Representative Slawick grew up in Arizona, is that right?
Tucson, yeah.
Grew up in Tucson, so she has a particular interest in cactuses or whatever.
Southwestern children's
Southwestern
books,
art. It's that kind of really personal stuff. that you can see there. That has a price tag attached to it that's not insignificant. It's maybe $50 or something. I have one in my office. If anybody ever cares to visit me, you can have a cup of coffee with me and look through that book.
Yeah, I just say one thing that's helpful is you can say, well, I see you have an interest in Southwestern Children's Book. I share that too, or I see you golf.
Yeah, right.
I love to golf,
opener.
and
And just briefly, please look at the Minnesota Campaign Finance and Public Disclosure Board for specific rules about gifts, for example. We have one more question from Ted. What about when you're interested in weighing in on an issue or a bill which is in a committee, but your representative is not a part of that committee? How would you suggest approaching that?
Well, I think if a constituent came to me and said, I'm really interested in health concerns or the health insurance bill that's passing, but I see you don't sit on that, I would let them know, one, where you are on the issue, because they may be voting on that on the House floor, and so it may not hit them in committee, but it will hit them later on, and then you can say, who do you suggest I should talk to, or could you talk to the chair of Health and Human Services, Tom Huntley, and let him know that this is really important to me. And when we go into caucus, which is where all the legislators are meeting privately, we often will say, I had a constituent call me about this, and they're really mad, or they're really upset, or they're going to lose their house, or they're going to lose their health insurance. And so I think you can approach them, again, as a constituent, but then either ask them to connect with that other person, or say, can you keep this in mind when it comes to the House floor?
Great.
Or Senate.
Okay, well, it's 11:02. We want to thank you for joining us today. I hope that you found this to be useful information and anecdotes. And as with all of our webinars, we would like to offer ourselves as a resource to you for additional information. You can see our contact information there. And I'd like to just highlight that the Autism Society of Minnesota has the best email that says awesome.
Yes, that's right.
I don't think that was an accident.
No.
It is awesome. So please don't hesitate to be in touch with us, either on strategic questions or legal questions. Those would be for me. And we're happy to be a resource, and we wish you the best in building strategic relationships with elected officials. Thanks for joining us.